Hi guys, Chris here with Super Savvy Travelers. Hey, I wanted to take some time today to give some tips to retirees who are planning to live here full time. And that's very different than being here a few months out of the year. It's a completely different animal. And when you move over here to live, there are certain things that you really have to do. Of course, the first one is learn Italian. And I'm sorry, anybody can learn Italian. Anybody can. You all learned English at some point. Anybody can learn Italian. You just have to do it. Now, what I recommend is, of course, Italian for Dummies, great book, Drive Time Italian for drilling, but also get a tutor. You get a tutor and you're going to learn a whole lot quicker than if you just come over and try to absorb it. Absorbing it, I've never seen that work for anybody other than a kid. Kids have all day to sit there and absorb Italian, and their brains are like little sponges. Not so much with us. We really need a tutor. We really need somebody to break it down for us and explain it and be with us on that journey. So get a tutor and learn Italian. Now, another thing is, don't just have one person in the couple learn Italian. You both have to speak it. And I've seen disasters happen where one person spoke it and the other person said, well, my wife speaks it, I'm not going to worry about it. Well, something happened to the wife. And then that person was completely abandoned because they hadn't learned Italian and they didn't have a part in the community. So another thing that you have to remember about learning Italian is, what if the member of your couple that speaks it and took the time to learn it is compromised and needs medical care, and you have to be the one communicating with the doctor? It's very important. You can't call an interpreter at midnight or 2 a.m. that will come down to the hospital and translate for you. It has to be you. There's no one else. Secondly, look for an Italian community. Don't just go where there's expats. I'm on so many of these forums and whatnot on Facebook. Everybody's, wow, I need an expat community. No, you don't. Honest to God, you don't. It's nice to hear English every once in a while, but you don't need an expat community. And those of us who got here when we didn't have an expat community so much. We had a few people that would arrive maybe when we were here, but most of the time we had to speak Italian with the locals and become part of the community. The expat community is so limited. If you're only speaking English to people who live here, what are they going to impart to you? They're not going to impart the history of Italy. They're not going to impart the culture and the recipes and all of the things that you're going to learn by being a part of the community. And you came over here because you wanted to be part of the community. So that's something very important. What I've seen with the expat groups here, a lot of them are just not happy. Happiness comes from coming over here, being part of the community, being a contributing part of the community, and enjoying that connection that you have with the locals. Now, another thing is, make your own connections. A lot of times people will depend on that one person that has all the connections. And that's fine until that person either decides to move or go somewhere else, or until that person decides they're tired of being the connector person. You have to go down and make your own connections. Now, it's okay when you first arrive to ask for, how do you get to the NL and get your electrics turned on? That's totally understandable. But years in, if you're still going, how do I get light bulbs or something like that? No, you figure it out on your own. Go down to the hardware store and get in a conversation with the guy. Use Google Translate. That's how it's done. And don't worry about looking stupid. They really appreciate it if you speak Italian with them and you really are trying to learn. Now, another thing is, go out of your way to help people, because help is a two-way flow. And if you come in and you accept help and you accept all these wonderful things coming to you, but you don't flow it out, it's going to stop. People are not going to be willing to help you anymore. And the communities are based on help flows going back and forth. I mean, these people have lived here for generations. Many times in towns that were isolated, they had to flow help back and forth. It was a survival point. So that's what they do naturally. So when you arrive, you have to make sure that you are doing whatever you can to help the people around you, help the community, help the neighbor with her groceries, just anything you can do to help. And it's so appreciated and vitally important. People who don't help other people are miserable. Now, the final thing I'm going to bring up is something I don't like to bring up because I don't like to think about it. But as we get older, and even if we're younger, we have to realize that sooner or later, one of us is going to be alone. And you have to look at, how will that person survive? How will they function in a town in Italy where they live when they're on their own? If they don't speak Italian, if they haven't made their connections, if they're not a part of a community. I will tell you that I saw one particular case where the husband leaned very heavily on the wife for the Italian, for the connection, for everything. And when she died, it was a very bad situation. It did not go well. To be already dealing with the grief and loss and then have to realize that you don't have a place in the community or you don't have a way of communicating, it can be pretty hard. So definitely keep that in mind. Also, in terms of mobility and things like that, as you get older, do you want a country house where you have to go out and mow the lawn? Do you want to live where you have to go up a bunch of steps to get to the piazza or to your car or anything like that? You have to kind of keep these things in mind. And it's all very interesting because when I first got here, everything was fine. I'm like, yay, let's do the steps. And then I started running B&Bs. And I've always had the hip thing, but the steps kind of kept everything in. It was kind of like a therapy. It kept everything going. But then I broke my ankle, and it became wildly obvious that if you are mobility challenged, like I currently am, and hope to be less so in about 6 months or a year, steps, ramps, stairs, all of those things can be a real impediment to living and to happiness. So keep that in mind. Look at where you're going to be in 20 years physically, and figure out whether the house that you're looking at is going to see you through the rest of your life, or if you're just getting it so you can live in a few years and then sell it and move. That's also something too, but definitely keep that in mind. It's not fun to look at, but it's vitally important, guys. So anyway, have a great Ferragosto, and I'll see you soon.